Imagine this for a second. Two people retire on the same day, same age, same savings, $1 million each. They both feel the same emotion walking out of work for the last time, relief mixed with fear. Relief because the grind is over, fear because now the paycheck stops. Fast forward 20 years. One of them dies peacefully with nearly $3 million still sitting in their portfolio. Not because they gambled, not because they found the next Tesla, not because they got lucky with crypto. They simply retired. And if that sounds absurd, it's because retirement math is one of the most misunderstood systems in modern finance. Most people believe retirement is a slow burn, a controlled decline. You spend down your savings year by year until eventually the tank runs dry. That's the story we're told. Save aggressively so you don't run out. But here's the twist nobody prepares you for. For a huge percentage of retirees, the tank doesn't shrink. It grows. And the reason feels almost unfair once you see the mechanics. Let's break the illusion. When someone retires with $1 million, the financial industry trains them to think in survival terms. Don't overspend, withdraw cautiously, protect the principal. Treat the portfolio like fragile glass. So, retirees do exactly that. They pull maybe 3%, sometimes 4%, often even less. On paper, that sounds conservative, responsible, safe, but historically, diversified portfolios, the boring, vanilla, index-heavy kind, average long-term returns between 7% and 10% annually. Not every year, not smoothly, but over decades, that's the pattern. Now pause and feel what that means. If your portfolio grows at roughly 8% and you withdraw 3%, you're not depleting wealth. You're harvesting growth. It's like owning an orchard that produces more fruit than you eat. You're living off the surplus while the trees keep expanding. And that's where the accidental wealth begins. A retiree pulling modest income from a portfolio that continues compounding isn't draining assets. They're slowing acceleration. The portfolio is still climbing, just more quietly. This is the paradox retirees live inside. They believe they're preserving wealth while wealth is multiplying underneath them. And here's where psychology enters the room, because math alone doesn't drive retirement behavior. Fear does. After decades of being told retirement is fragile, retirees develop a scarcity mindset that refuses to switch off. Spending feels dangerous. Watching balances fluctuate feels personal. Every market dip feels like the beginning of collapse. So instead of withdrawing aggressively, retirees underspend. Way under. Large institutional studies tracking real retirees, not theoretical models, consistently show something shocking. Most retirees withdraw closer to 2% than 4%. 2%. That's not portfolio decay. That's portfolio preservation on steroids. Imagine planting a tree designed to grow 8 feet per year, then trimming 2 feet off the top annually. The tree still grows 6 feet. That's what's happening inside retirement portfolios everywhere. And this isn't rare behavior, it's the dominant pattern. Why? Because retirees don't trust longevity math. They plan emotionally, not statistically. They picture worst-case scenarios, market crashes, medical emergencies, living to 100, and default to hyper-conservatism, which accidentally engineers wealth growth. But the story gets even stranger once Social Security enters the equation. Most people mentally separate Social Security from their investment portfolio. They treat it like a bonus check instead of a structural pillar. Yet for many retirees, Social Security covers a massive percentage of baseline living expenses, housing, utilities, groceries, insurance. When that guaranteed income reduces how much must be withdrawn from investments, the portfolio experiences even less pressure. Think of it like this. Your lifestyle costs $60,000 annually. Social Security covers $40,000. Your portfolio only needs to produce $20,000. That's a 2% withdrawal rate on a $1 million portfolio. Again, you're harvesting growth, not consuming capital. And while retirees worry about running out of money, the portfolio quietly compounds. This is how ordinary retirees, teachers, engineers, mid-career professionals, end up with balances that look absurd compared to what they expected, not because they optimized aggressively, but because conservative withdrawal behavior combined with market growth creates a structural surplus. The irony is almost poetic. The fear of running out of money is the exact behavior that prevents running out of money. Now let's zoom out and look at the time horizon, because this is where compounding becomes dramatic. Retirement today often spans 20 to 30 years, sometimes longer. That's an investment lifetime equal to an entire career. And compounding over decades isn't linear, it's exponential. $1 million growing at 7% annually doubles roughly every 10 years. Even with modest withdrawals layered in, growth pressure remains powerful. So what retirees experience isn't depletion, it's delayed compounding. The portfolio bends under withdrawals, but keeps rising. Picture a river flowing downhill while someone scoops water out with a cup. The flow continues. The cup doesn't stop the river, and this creates an emotional contradiction retirees rarely anticipate. They enter retirement expecting scarcity management, but experience asset expansion. Yet psychologically, they remain anchored in defensive mode. This is why you see retirees with seven-figure portfolios still clipping coupons, debating small purchases, hesitating over travel, worrying about financial survival, despite overwhelming evidence of security. Their identity formed during accumulation years, save, protect, defer, and never fully transitions to distribution mode. The result? Wealth grows faster than confidence. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many retirees die far more money than they ever intended to accumulate, not because they planned legacy wealth, but because behavioral conservatism combined with compounding engineered surplus. This is where the system reveals its deeper structure. Retirement planning models, especially the famous 4% framework, were built around catastrophic scenarios, depression-level market timing, inflation spikes, worst-case sequences. They are intentionally pessimistic, which means real-world outcomes often exceed projections dramatically. The models aren't wrong, they're protective, and protection compounds. The financial ecosystem prefers retirees to err on the side of caution because caution eliminates catastrophic failure. Nobody wants to be the case study that ran out of money, so planning frameworks lean conservative. Retirees internalize that conservatism, behavior amplifies it, markets do what markets historically do, grow over long periods, and the combined effect produces something retirees never expected: financial abundance emerging from defensive strategy. But part one isn't about celebrating surplus, it's about understanding the hidden engine driving it. Because once you see the mechanics, withdrawal behavior, social security layering, compounding pressure, psychological conservatism, retirement stops looking like a countdown clock and starts looking like a self-sustaining system. And here's the question part two is going to explore. If retirees are accidentally becoming wealthier than planned, why do so many still feel financially fragile? Why does fear outlive math? And how does this psychological gap change retirement decisions in ways most people never examine? Because the real story isn't just about portfolios growing, it's about what happens when human behavior collides with exponential math. And that's where retirement stops being a financial problem and becomes a human one. Here's where retirement math stops being a spreadsheet problem and becomes a human behavior problem. Because if the numbers clearly show that many retirees are accidentally growing wealth, why do so few feel safe spending it? The answer isn't hidden in the market, it's hidden in identity. For 30 or 40 years, a working adult is conditioned to believe that survival equals accumulation. You earn, you save, you delay gratification. Every responsible financial decision reinforces the same internal message: protect the future. That mindset becomes part of who you are. It's not just behavior, it's self-image. So when retirement arrives and the system suddenly flips, when the instruction becomes spend instead of save, the brain doesn't cooperate. It feels wrong. Imagine training for decades to build a wall and then being told the goal is to slowly dismantle it. Even if the math says it's safe, your instincts resist. That resistance is one of the most powerful forces shaping retirement outcomes. Retirees don't overspend, they overprotect. And overprotection is exactly what allows compounding to continue doing its quiet work. But there's another layer most people never consider. Spending naturally declines with age, not because retirees are forced to tighten budgets, but because lifestyle priorities evolve. Early retirement often includes travel, hobbies, social experiences. But as years pass, routines simplify. Consumption becomes less about expansion and more about comfort. Real-world tracking of retiree households shows a consistent pattern. Spending peaks in the early retirement years, then gradually tapers. Healthcare costs rise, yes, but many discretionary expenses fall faster. Fewer luxury purchases, less commuting, reduced impulse spending, smaller lifestyle ambitions. The result? Portfolio withdrawal pressure decreases over time, which means compounding faces even less resistance. This is the quiet structural advantage retirees rarely anticipate. Their lifestyle becomes more efficient while their assets continue growing. And because spending behavior shifts organically, not through forced austerity, retirees don't feel deprived. They simply want less. Now, combine this behavioral shift with market recovery dynamics. Markets are volatile in the short term. Every retiree eventually experiences downturns. Headlines scream, account balances dip, fear spikes. This is the moment many people assume retirement math collapses. But historically, downturns are temporary interruptions inside long-term growth cycles. Retirees withdrawing modest percentages, especially under 3%, are remarkably insulated from sequence risk. The portfolio absorbs volatility because withdrawals are small relative to asset growth. Think of it like trimming branches during a storm. The tree bends, but the roots remain strong. When markets recover, and historically they always have over long horizons, compounding resumes from a slightly lower base, often accelerating faster than retirees expect. This resilience is built into the structure of diversified portfolios. But here's the psychological trap. Humans don't experience volatility as math. They experience it as fear. A 15% portfolio drop doesn't feel like a statistical event. It feels like danger. So retirees react emotionally. They spend less. They withdraw cautiously. They tighten lifestyle margins even further. And ironically, this defensive behavior increases the odds of long-term surplus. Fear unintentionally becomes a wealth preservation strategy. But the story goes deeper once longevity enters the equation. One of the strongest emotional drivers behind underspending is uncertainty about lifespan. Nobody knows how long retirement will last. So retirees mentally prepare for extremes. What if I live to 100? That question alone can suppress spending for decades. Yet statistical life expectancy doesn't require portfolios to behave as if retirement lasts forever. Planning frameworks already incorporate longevity risk. Conservative withdrawal strategies account for extended timelines. Still, fear overrides probability. Retirees don't plan for average outcomes. They plan for survival scenarios. And survival math is conservative by design. That conservatism compounds into wealth. But here's where a subtle emotional contradiction appears. Retirees who overprotect assets often experience a strange tension between financial security and lived experience. They feel wealthy on paper, but cautious in practice. This disconnect creates a psychological consumption gap, the distance between what retirees could safely enjoy and what they actually allow themselves to enjoy. In many cases, that gap widens over time, not because resources shrink, but because habits harden. Saving was rewarded for decades. Spending feels like betrayal. And this is where retirement becomes less about portfolio performance and more about emotional permission. The ability to spend isn't mathematical, it's psychological. Some retirees never fully cross that bridge. They continue living below their means, watching balances grow, accumulating surplus they never intended to build. Others gradually adapt. Confidence increases as years pass without financial catastrophe. Market cycles come and go. The portfolio survives. Trust builds, spending normalizes, but the structural engine remains. Modest withdrawals plus compounding growth plus evolving lifestyle equals expanding wealth. Now, let's introduce a real-world pattern financial planners quietly observe. Retirees who enter retirement overly fearful often end up in the strongest long-term financial positions, not because they predicted markets correctly, but because their behavior minimized risk exposure. They didn't time the market, they timed their spending psychology. Every cautious decision compounded, and the result wasn't just portfolio survival, it was portfolio expansion. Which brings us to the emotional climax of this entire system. Retirement success isn't defined by how much money you accumulate. It's defined by how effectively your behavior aligns with long-term math. And for many retirees, that alignment happens accidentally. They don't need perfect forecasting. They don't need aggressive strategies. They need disciplined moderation. And fear often supplies it. But here's the part that changes everything. Understanding this system gives retirees a choice. Instead of blindly underspending out of fear, they can spend intentionally with confidence. They can recognize that a portfolio growing faster than withdrawals isn't fragile, it's resilient. They can enjoy lifestyle flexibility without assuming catastrophe lurks around every market fluctuation. And this awareness transforms retirement from a defensive posture into a balanced one. Not reckless spending, not hoarding, but informed distribution. Money becomes a tool for experience instead of a scoreboard for survival. And when retirees internalize this shift, something powerful happens. Fear loses its grip, confidence replaces caution, and wealth becomes something to live with, not merely protect. That's the real revelation behind retirees turning 1 million into 3 million. It isn't magic. It isn't luck. It's the compound effect of conservative behavior colliding with exponential systems over long time horizons. A structure quietly designed to favor patience. And once you see that structure clearly, retirement stops being a countdown to depletion. It becomes a long runway of possibility. Because the math was never working against retirees, it was working in their favor all along.